It's a gargantuan caliber blunderbuss.
Oh, that's going to kick, isn't it? Yeah.
And that crossbar slides down and fires the pistol.
Oh! You'd have to be so brave to take on that technology in that day and age.
I do wonder what happens when it goes wrong.
Bad things, man. What the f*** is that? Hi, it's Todd from Todd's Workshop and
Matt Easton, Schola Gladiatoria.
And we are kids in the candy shop. So we are down at the Pitt Rivers Museum. We've come down together to have a look at what there is, and my goodness, there is. We're just going to walk around marvelling at what is just a place of marvels. So very quickly about the Pitt Rivers Museum. It was put together by Colonel Pitt Rivers in the late 19th century, and it is a collection of European and ethnographic arms and armour. Well, the museum isn't, this floor is. The museum is absolutely packed full of just anything you can imagine, but this is what Matt and I are imagining.
It's crazy how much stuff there is. It's such a dense collection, isn't it? Everywhere you look, you can just see 100 things you want to go and look at. It's incredible.
Well, let's start looking. Wow. Okay, so Matt, we are precisely 3 meters from the door and we've stopped already. What have you got in this cabinet that takes your eye?
I mean, there's so many things, aren't there? I'm drawn immediately to this boar spear-like point, which seems to be attached to a pistol, which is for attaching to a shaft. So it seems to be some sort of hunting. It's Indian made, so it's from Uttar Pradesh in India, dated to the late 1800s. So it looks essentially like a boar spear pistol combo. I don't know how you use those two things together, but
it's pretty alarming for me because you're going to have to get within that far of the boar's head to actually activate the pistol by the look of it.
yeah.
Yeah, it is, because the trigger guard is underneath, so you are literally getting right up to the animal that is now speared on the end. Can you see these two fine little reinforced? Are they reinforcers because they don't look like it, or are they spring-loaded?
According to the description here, so it's for jamming into the large prey,
Yeah,
or throwing, although to me it looks more like
Yeah.
using like a boar spear.
yeah.
And that crossbar slides down and fires the pistol.
Oh, should we read the cards before we talk about it? Right. Don't just look at the pictures. Read the words.
So it
Okay.
goes down to the trigger mechanism, and you can see there's a lever that pushes the trigger.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Although the trigger can also be finger activated by the look of that.
Yeah,
So,
that'd be quite easy to make, actually.
so effectively, you thrust the beast, and yeah, the crossbar, which is what you always have on something like a boar spear, or I guess this is going to be lions and tigers as well, or Asian lions,
Yeah,
tigers,
I mean, it says tigers there,
leopards, whatever.
Yeah.
Some animal that you do not want near you is about the size of it. So that crossbar is there to stop the animal running itself down the spear, which they otherwise might do, and then finding you. And then it automatically shoots when it lands on the crossbar.
It's
Genius.
fantastic.
Brilliant.
That's amazing.
That is a lovely thing.
You could maybe make something like that with a pistol crossbow version.
I could, but I won't, policeman. But while we're on the subject of these things, that's lovely actually. And this is what is magic about the Pitt Rivers. I've been here before. I was here a year and a bit ago. You could just spend hours going round, and then you walk around and you'll find different things. Anyway, but then above it, we've got another Indian, again, combination weapon. It is an axe and pistol. That is not just a particularly Asian thing or Indian thing. It is absolutely also a European thing. Having the sort of combination axe and single shot pistol, or mace and single shot pistol, is a very European thing as well. I mean, they never really caught on big time, I think, because there aren't enough of them. They're not everywhere.
I think they're almost executive toys of the time, aren't they? But this one's interesting because the axe blade is the handle of the gun. So I think I'm used to seeing combination weapons where they shoot in the same direction as the blade. But in this case, the blade's towards you, you shoot the gun, then you turn it around and use it.
You definitely don't use the axe first.
No, because having a loaded
you wouldn't want an ND discharge into your arm, would you? So yes, actually you're right about that. I'd overlooked that. But that is an unusual arrangement.
This one at the side's very interesting, could get overlooked because it's perhaps less glamorous, but it's a whip pistol, and it's actually English. So while we're used to seeing a lot of exotic weapons from India, but that's actually English, sort of Georgian, early Victorian. So it's just a whip, but it's got a pistol built into the shaft.
Carried by the post boys.
Yeah,
Who led the horses of a coach party.
it's a dangerous business in those days.
Yeah. So that's 1810 to 1850.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's way past sort of the traditional highwayman 18th century period.
But there was still, there was still robberies and muggings going on.
This top one here, which almost looks like an anti-tank rifle by the barrel.
But the important thing is, it's a form of revolver.
Yeah.
So
1840, so properly early.
So this is pre-Colt, at least before Colt was really kind of famous anyway. So it's a revolving musket. And this is the period where they were really starting to look at how can we increase our rate of fire.
I'll tell you, I'll just read a bit off the card. I've learnt my lesson. This particular weapon discharged hot gas near the face, and a stray spark could set off all the chambers at once.
Yeah, a chain fire, which was a problem with early revolvers as well, one of the reasons that I think some people, when revolvers first came in, they were a little bit reluctant to switch over to this technology,
because of the history.
Yeah, so they stuck with double-barrel pistols, a pair of them, and this kind of stuff, which you still get 4 shots with as opposed to 5 with the Colt. And of course, there's more, as with any new technology. We even see it today. There's more to go wrong because it's new technology. They haven't quite figured out everything yet.
You ever come across that early internal combustion engine that was run on gunpowder?
I've heard of it, but
What's good to go wrong? Right, let's move on. Next cabinet. Air guns. Now, when I was a kid or younger, I thought they were kind of like a modern-ish idea.
Yeah.
But actually, I believe that certainly the Austrian army was fielding them in either the 17th or the 18th century, I'm not sure. But they were facing them off against muskets, so they were contemporary. I've seen Tudor period air guns where they're pumped up with a stirrup pump like this. And they, just like these ones here, the stock effectively is the pressure reservoir. How you can build an airtight tank that doesn't blow your head off, but an airtight tank and a valve system that does multiple shots out of a single pumping in 1560, I have no idea, but they did.
Pre-charged modern air rifles seem like a modern thing, don't they? But here they are. Here's an example dating 1770 to 1800.
Well, there's an Austrian one here, 1650 to 1800.
Yeah, I mean, it's mind-boggling.
And I had a chat with a guy, maybe 10 years ago now, but he shot original pieces. So he'd always get them pressure tested beforehand because, why wouldn't you? And the pressures were high.
Yes. They would have to be militarily, and to shoot a larger caliber projectile than we're used to seeing coming out of air guns these days. Yeah.
And I have a slight feeling, I could be wrong, but I have a slight feeling that Napoleon had a bit of a hate campaign against them.
I have heard that, yes. I think it was at the Swiss, I think he had an issue with using them, marksman. But it's not something I personally researched, so I don't want to propagate myths if that's not correct. But it's
myself neither, but
yeah.
But they have a long history. And they do have a military history as well as a sporting history.
Yeah.
But the one thing I wanted to show you at the bottom here is a walking cane, but it's a walking cane air gun.
Oh, wow.
And so this one here is dated to, 19th century, it doesn't say. But fantastically interesting, but such a longer history than we give them credit for.
And I think the other thing which gets overlooked with them as well is this is an age where standard muskets make a huge plume of smoke when you shoot them. This is pre-smokeless powder. And so the advantage of having a firearm where after you shot you can still see.
Yeah. And not be seen.
And quieter, of course, as well. So, there are certain types of poachers firearm that have been made that have been disguised as other things, and the ability to go into a forest and bag a pheasant or whatever you want, a rabbit for tea, without having to make a big noise and plume of smoke, it really advantageous. So
and the other thing as well is muzzle energy. So I don't know offhand, you might know, but the muzzle energy of something like a Brown Bess, I'm going to hazard a guess, 1,500 joules, maybe more. You don't need anything remotely like that to kill somebody. And so I was doing 17 joules with a stone bow, or 18 joules with a stone bow, and a 18mm lead ball, and that went straight through the breast of a chicken and into the cavity beyond. And that's only 18 joules. So even if one of these things is kicking out 400 joules or something, that's still 9mm bullet territory.
Yeah. And also, particularly when we're looking at this sort of Napoleonic era, the ranges that we're usually talking about are nowhere near as great as later in the 19th century. So, you know, standard sort of musket lines shooting at each other might be 60 yards sort of distant, you know, 60, 80 yards. So yeah, you can shoot with a musket at 100 yards, but it's not really optimal.
Not what it's for.
So you know, with an air gun, so long as you're getting 100 yards out of it, then that's still useful.
You'd have to be so brave to take on that technology in that day and age. I mean, there is no way now I would ever shoot something like that. To have a pressure tank at 500, 600 bar or whatever it might be here.
I do wonder what happens when it goes wrong.
Bad things, man.
Like military muskets, and even true of modern military rifles, tend to be a bit overbuilt for the military because they know that the standard private soldiers are going to knock them around, they're going to bash things with them, you know, they're going to get dropped. I don't think you could do that with one of these air guns many times before you'd regret it.
What the is that? Sorry, camera. Blunderbuss cabinet. First of all, not everything in here is a blunderbuss. So we've got certainly a grenade launcher at the top here. Yeah. Or is that?
No, it is a
it's
a blunderbuss. It's a gargantuan caliber blunderbuss.
Got 45mm 1.75" bore on it. That's going to kick, isn't it? So that's Indian 19th century.
Yeah. So it's for service in India. So it says it's actually written on it. It was taken from North India in 1910. Oh. It's older than that, but it was brought back in 1910.
Fabulous. So we were just discussing blunderbusses, and I think neither of us are prepared to say that this is fact. But cartoon version of a blunderbuss is a shotgun that spreads massive, and you have the funnel-shaped barrel on it to somehow make the pellets grip around the edge and fly out, which they don't do. No. They basically travel straight out. Yes, I suppose it's like an unchoked shotgun, really, isn't it?
Yes.
So you're going to get a decent spread on it. But what it's not is shooting at 45 degrees. But my understanding of it, particularly if you're like a carter or something like that, or you're wagon and horses and you're bouncing around and you're trying to recharge for your next shot, it's an inbuilt loading funnel. It's
a funnel, yeah, in my view, and I've never seen any evidence that a blunderbuss particularly spread any more than the width of the barrel further down, because at that point, obviously, the projectile's already travelling in a straight line.
But then we come to the top one. So Matt and I are both familiar with grenade launchers, which is, again, a bit like the air guns. It's not a new thing.
Certainly by the 18th century, it's a known thing, but I don't honestly know when it started.
No, I don't either, so tell us. But what it's not is like a First World War thing, which is kind of in popular culture, I think, where most people think they begin.
Yeah, I mean, there's some risk with these, because most of them at this date, you have to light a fuse on the grenade. So you have to load your musket, then you have to all be ready to fire, and you've primed the pan and everything else. Then you have to light the fuse on the grenade, and then you have to hope that that it goes. That it has the desired effect.
See, I read a book which had a fantastic phrase about how you had to be very. I can't even do it justice, but how you had to be very brave to operate one of these things, because in the early days you lit the fuse and then you shot. But then at some point, somebody discovered actually that you didn't need to light the fuse. That whatever way round you did the shot, the blast, the lifting charge, would ignite the fuse on the way out. So yes, in the early days, it was exactly that, that you lit and you prayed that you didn't get a misfire.
But I mean, and it's worth pointing out that grenadiers, you may have heard the term grenadiers. Grenadiers, even in the British Army, they're often selected for being the tallest. So their job actually was to throw grenades as well as having a musket and a bayonet. So usually, this is unusual. This is something that was experimented with, but usually grenades were just a thing that you threw. And I think the word grenade comes from grenado, which is a Spanish word.
Grenado,
yeah, and I think usually actually they were referred to as bombs in England, and even as late as World War I. If you read World War I sources, they just refer to them as bombs. So they say, I went into the trench with a revolver and 12 bombs.
They were Mills bombs.
Yeah, Mills bombs, exactly, and you know, just throwing them around. But they did also have mechanical devices for lobbing, so they had mini catapults and stuff. For throwing. So there are many safer and more usual ways of throwing grenades than shooting them out off the end of a musket.
And then we've got this thing, which, what the heck is this?
It's a trap gun, isn't it? So I think there are many types of firearm device particularly from the 19th century, and this is 19th century. This is a flintlock, but you also get percussion lock ones as well, where essentially the trigger is attached to something. It can be a pressure plate or it can be a tripwire.
Well, looking at this one here, you've got 3 rings on the end of the trigger rod. So it looks to me that you can mount 3 tripwires on this.
Which is brilliant.
Yeah.
I mean, if you want to protect an area or even just send a warning, you know, if you want to send a warning shot, I think some of them point upwards, but this one it seems to be pointing at ground level, so it will shoot an intruder in the ankle probably. So it's essentially, it's the 19th century equivalent of a claymore mine, isn't it?
Yeah.
We should perhaps also just fleetingly mention the pop-out bayonet. So this is actually really common. This isn't unusual, and it's very, very common on blunderbusses, if that's the plural of blunderbuss, and pistols.
Blunderbusses.
Yeah, but particularly for travelling ones. So this is an age where you can only really carry one firearm practically, and it's only got one shot. Okay, so most of these travelling pistols or blunderbusses, and these were often carried by people on post wagons or just, you know, travelling people. So you've got one shot, and once that one shot is gone, well, you're probably not going to be carrying a sword around most of the time, so a bayonet. And it has a little trigger at the back, so it comes back, there's a little leaf spring there, you the point clips under there, and they spring out and lock into position. It's a tried and tested and very common, good part of the 18th century and right the way through the 19th century. And even later on, you get these mounted on revolvers sometimes as well.
Oh, yes, I've seen that. So there's one thing I've never made, but I'd actually quite like to, is I guess it's probably early to mid 18th century, and they're known as Carter's swords. Have you come across those?
No.
They're kind of a bit like a cutlass. They're shortish, curved-ish, choppy-ish, something like that. But into the scabbard is built like a 4 or a 5 cartridge magazine for shots, and it's usually like a metal tin construction built into the scabbard with a little lid on it to keep everything dry.
Yeah.
So that you can reload your blunderbuss while you're doing that, and when that all goes wrong, you still got your choppy sword. What the heck is that?
Oh, that's for measuring powder strength, isn't it?
Oh!
Yeah, it's a tester. So you have a little calibrated thing here, and so you fire it, because obviously in the 19th century, 18th century in this case, late 18th, powder had a vast variety of qualities and types. You could get very fine powder, was better for priming, and different powder for different firearms. And also, different nations had access to different quality powder. Now, not to be too patriotic here, but British powder was reckoned to be pretty good. And in the Napoleonic period, some people have argued that French powder, certainly once it was away into the wars, wasn't of the quality it was earlier on.
We did a lot of guano mining in the South Seas and things. Is that because France didn't have such good access to that?
I don't know the reasons. All I know is the outcome is that it is reckoned that British powder had a better energy output than French powder did, kind of in the second half of the Napoleonic Wars. And this might have had a real impact on, for example, ship penetration of shots at sea, but also the range and effectiveness in land battle. These are actually not uncommon devices, and they carried, you even find percussion ones as well. So simply, the higher up it pushes the thing, the more productive, you know, the powder is.
So so it just blows the dial out the way.
You find out, this is a 5-notch powder and this is an 8-notch powder. Well, I think I'll choose the 8-notch powder, please. Maybe pay a bit more for it.
So this is the last cabinet for our firearms film. Yet again, the Pitt Rivers has taken us by surprise, and we thought we'd whip through in half an hour, and here we are, 45 minutes in, and we have done about an eighth of this floor.
There's so much here, isn't there?
There is.
It's worthy of several visits, I think.
Cannon. This is the cannon cabinet. So it's needless to say, it's not cannon like you get at the Royal Armouries in Leeds or something like that. But they are so interesting. So Matt, up at the top here, we've got a 4-barreled iron handgun, very much blacksmith made. To me, it looks like it wasn't made by a gun founder. It's cruder than that. So you've got a steel socket here and the 4 branches which become the breech plugs of the barrels. But you can see that the hammer work on it. It's not been cleaned up. It's not a posh, expensive piece, even though as a 4-barreled thing, it's quite an unusual, exciting piece. It's not a well-made piece. It's a functionally made piece.
It is interesting as well. In the 15th century, you get two forms of attaching the barrel to the stock, if we want to call it that. It's more of a shaft in this case. But this one is almost like a pole arm, isn't it? It literally has a socket on it, like you'd get with a pike, but then it has 4 barrels on the end instead. It's a really nice piece of ironwork. I find it quite aesthetically pleasing. The other type is where you actually have a barrel sitting in the stock, more like a cannon.
But what this is interesting is individual touch holes, isn't it? It's not, so they'd actually have to shoot one, prime the next one and shoot it. So it's definitely not a rapid fire gun, even though they are preloaded, I suppose rapid fire at the time. But not, if that had flintlocks on it or percussion caps or something, you could argue that it'd be rapid shooting.
Again, 15th century is, I think a lot of people think of the era of pike and shot as 16th century onwards, 16th, 17th century, but 15th century guns are really, really important. And you know, you could say that a large part of the French kicking the English out at the end of the 100 Years' War was thanks to their
use of
early adoption of firearms. But of course, people like the Bohemians as well made extensive use of gunpowder weapons. So in terms of the date of this could be anywhere really from about 1450 all the way through to maybe 1490, something like that. So this is very much the time of the Wars of the Roses, and for all we know, could have been used at that time. You know, the Battle of Barnet, for example, just north of London, we saw extensive gun use, and again at the Battle of Bosworth. They weren't game changers, but they were starting to become more and more important, and especially in naval as well. So, you know, obviously Mary Rose, hugely important, firepower hugely important by that point. But the fact that you've got the socket coming into the barrel at the end of a pole, almost like a pole arm. This is a culture who are used to making bills and spears. They're going, well, we'll just put the barrel on the end on a socket, like, you know, with a pole arm. And we do see them in things like Froissart's Chronicles from the sort of 1480s. So yeah, you know, this type of thing definitely would have been around all over Europe at this point. And as I say, very important in siege, very important in naval, and starting to be more and more important on land as well.
Well, is it after discharge as well, you've still got what is effectively a mace?
Yeah, so I suppose, and funnily enough, actually this is actually quite similar to the Henry VIII's mace combo, isn't it? So essentially, that's a similar arrangement of barrels at the end,
Was
isn't
that
it?
a wheel lock or a matchlock, Henry VIII?
That's a matchlock, yeah. So it's just got touch holes
So
like this.
essentially not significantly different.
We've got a couple of 15th century guns here, and they're rare. They're really rare things. If you're in Oxford and you can come and look at the Pitt Rivers, these look like, you know, rusty pitted bits of iron, but historically they're super important.
Yeah.
You know, they changed history.
But then we've got this one, fourth down actually, which is a hook gun. It's a much more traditional kind of a rampart gun, or common, but a lower grade version. So the hook is there again to stick it on the gunnels of a ship or over a castle wall and to take the recoil.
Although it looks perhaps boring to some people, this gun underneath is a rampart gun, they've listed it as.
It's a big old bore on this, sorry.
Yeah, but it's also quite long, so you're going to get big pressure build up in there.
So that's about 25mm 1-inch bore on there.
And it's really interesting to me because looking at later firearms, it goes from what I think is octagonal, looking at it, to round section, which funnily enough is a transition we see still on musket and shotgun and pistol barrels all the way through the 19th century.
Structural reason or just prettiness?
I don't know. I actually never really thought about it, but it's something we see on gun barrels, completely typical on 19th century guns. But this is a 15th, possibly 16th century gun, and this is from Hampton Court Palace.
It's a very elegant piece, it must be said.
It looks, to me, I mean, obviously it's got corrosion and pitting from age and having been rusty for a long time, but it looks fine quality to me. That you know, the line along that octagonal section it's a beautifully forged piece of iron.
Well, it's, you know, I don't know how much I'd want to charge that, but for a 500-year-old firearm, I would say that looks like it's still shootable. The one that fascinates me is the leather cannon. Now, this one is from Myanmar, 20th century leather cannon. Now, leather cannons you might think are crazy. And actually, I probably do think they're crazy, but they were a thing. So Scandinavia, particularly, they seem to do a lot of leather cannons, didn't they?
And wooden ones as well.
Yes.
They used to use tree trunk cannons, just bore a hole out, and it might only survive 1 or 2 shots.
Well, no, you bind them as well.
Right.
So they're not, leather cannons are not always just leather. They might have wire in them as well. But the fundamental construction is leather, or I would argue in this case rawhide, really.
Yeah.
But it's just a crazy concept that you would shoot a cannon made of leather and not expect to lose your head, which I have a feeling probably happened from time to time.
Yeah.
This one is an Asian version, but absolutely leather cannons were a European thing.
Yeah, and one thing to mention as well is this is for shooting shot rather than ball. So of course the pressure
Lower
is
pressures,
exactly, yeah. So you know, it's essentially a large
Large shotgun.
large
Actually,
shotgun.
that is interesting though, because I don't know if the Scandinavian leather cannons were, because they're often seen in civil defence situations, not offence. So you're not trying to take the battlements down, you're trying to stop the guys coming in.
Yeah.
In which cases, big shotguns
Probably
are
shot
perfect.
canister.
So
yeah,
there might
yeah.
well have been that, yeah. Anyway, let us know if anybody knows. Interesting area. And then the one on the end here is a Greek fire bomb from Egypt, 600 to 1200. I love my fire weapons, very interested in those. And I have actually just bought one at auction, in fact.
Really?
Yes, I have.
Wow.
Yeah. So these are simply clay containers. Generally, they contained incendiaries. They weren't explosive, so you didn't put powder in them.
Okay.
You'd put incendiaries in them. But again, it would still be a fuse, and it breaks. Or if it doesn't break, it squirts out and jets around.
So it's a bit like a Molotov cocktail then, is it?
Yes, a Molotov cocktail in the sense of that's a very liquid fire.
Yeah.
And so you're going to get liquid over a big area. But, for instance, on stones or something, it burns off relatively quickly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Whereas all the Greek fire type things, it's much stickier, gooier,
Okay.
kind of, yeah, and full of oxidizers, which a Molotov cocktail isn't. In the archaeological record, you find those everywhere because they were just absolutely mass-produced, all across sort of Byzantium and that area of North Africa there.
Oh, I mean,
Got a bigger one than this, Matt?
Yeah, so I don't want to boast, but my swivel gun is bigger than that one. But I love a swivel gun. This is a typical, so this is Malaysian, but you find them from the Philippines and various other parts of Southeast Asia. Very, very common type of gun. Probably the original ones were Portuguese and Dutch made, imported, and then they made local copies, and they made them very, very ornate. So they're usually cast in brass or bronze. And you can see this has got all lovely decoration on it, these sort of dolphin-esque.
Well, I noticed those actually, because of course they're completely superfluous. The dolphins are completely useless on something like this, because they're for winching up the heavy cannons.
Well, exactly, yeah. So kind of it's another sign that this is a copy of a European. So this is inspired by earlier European, 17th century European ones. Still being used in places like Sarawak, when the British turned up, when Bourne, who became the first White Rajah of Sarawak, turned up in the middle of the 19th century, and they were primarily mounted on boats because a lot of the warfare was on the rivers. So they had these massive kind of war canoes, but they also had some big sailing boats as well, a little bit similar to a Chinese junk. And they, depending on the size of the boat, they would have correspondingly bigger or smaller versions of these. This is a pretty small one. If you got off the boat and went into a fortification, you'd pull out the cannon with you and you'd go and plug it into the hole on the side of the fortification. So they're portable, you know, sort of static defence guns, and they could either shoot ball or shot. And they're lovely, lovely things.
We shall wrap up our firearms section at the Pitt Rivers.
Yeah.
But this is not going to be the end of it, is it?
No, and there are a lot more fascinating firearms here that we could come back and look at another time, I think. So.
Thank you very much, Matt.
Thank you.
We are going to do other films from here, so we're in for the day. So thank you very much to Pitt Rivers for allowing us to do this. And we're going to have a look at some of the Asian weapons, some of the European weapons, daggers, I don't know, whatever. But see you again, and if you've enjoyed this, don't forget both Matt and I are on Patreon, and your support there really, really does help. We both have websites. Go visit them. Go help us out. Because if you enjoyed this, you'll enjoy what we do for a living as well. See you guys.